All right. So, Miss Kiona, tell us about you. Tell us what you do, why you do it, where you are, all of the gorgeous,
Goodness.
juicy things.
Oh my gosh.
I know,
My
right?
life
Where are you going to
has
start?
changed a lot. So I am just going to go in. So right now, I am in between, I'm recreating myself
Mm-hmm.
actively right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But my history, I am a nurse practitioner. I have been a nurse for 20 years. Been a nurse practitioner for the last 11. Practicing here in America in kind of rural primary care, as well as working with the veteran and military Army population.
Mm-hmm.
I am a United States soldier. I practice part-time in the Army Reserves, and but right now I'm a battalion commander,
Yes.
so it's like having a full-time job. So I'm
Yeah.
very busy with that, but it's kind of fun to be able to talk about this because I was just having a stressful moment just a little bit ago. So talking about how our bodies deals with stress and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Yep.
um but I'm a single mom, and I have two kiddos. One I was just dropping off at soccer practice,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one who is 18 years old this year and graduating and joining the military herself. So it's just a whole lot going
Yep.
on
It
in
is.
my little family over here.
Yep, absolutely. And I really loved it when you said to me, I'm just going to be in the car at soccer practice. And I'm like, oh my God, that's just such our life that we are single moms that still juggle all the things, that are still giving and trying to heal the collective and create this ripple effect that if we can help one person just from one moment, then our purpose is fulfilled. So, and this is what we do. We do it in the car, we do it on the run, we do it on the fly, we do it with the, hey, Cass, I'm going to be 20 minutes, but now this has changed. So I'm going to be back at this. And I'm like, just let me know. And vice versa, like when we've done this before, and I'm pretty sure it is in the Facebook group for anyone watching that wants to go back in the Facebook group, we did something, oh my gosh, it would have been 2 years ago, I reckon now. I'll tag that segment in here as well, where we went through some very similar stuff, I think. It was about
Yeah.
food.
Yes.
So, yeah. So today, Kiona is coming in to speak with us all about how trauma and the effects of dis-ease shows up in our body, the effects on our gut health, and sort of that long-term effects that can happen if we're not listening to our body or noticing the signs or taking notice of the signs really consciously and intentionally.
Absolutely.
So, so Kiona, talk to us about, how that actually happens to start with. Like, how does trauma and anxiety create these long or short-term effects in our body from trauma?
So before, I just want to give a little bit of
Mhm.
pathophysiology, if that's okay, just
Yeah,
so we can
go
kind
for
of
it.
understand. So, and stress is good for us
Mm,
in a short little burst of scenarios,
mhm,
right? So we're stressed out about, if we're in a vehicle accident or if somebody is running after us or something like that, we have an epinephrine, norepinephrine that flows into our body, and we can run, we can shoot, we can do all the things that we need to do. Our pupils dilate so we can see our surroundings.
mhm,
Our glucose level goes up so that
mhm,
it can basically go to our
mhm.
muscles, and we have energy and we can run and we can do all the things. Way to go, Jenna. I'm losing 50 pounds. That's awesome. But those are the things that a healthy stress response does, right?
Yep.
So, but what happens is for those of us that get into this chronic stress, right? So,
Mhm,
being in a relationship where you are afraid to walk into the front door
mhm,
because you don't know what to expect,
mhm,
that is a low level chronic stress response
mhm,
that's happening every single day.
mhm,
And when that happens, our secondary stress response is turned on.
mhm,
And our secondary stress response does good things, again, for a
mhm,
short period of time, but if it's chronic, it can have a lot of effects. So if you want to look at it, I'm very visual and I don't have pictures for you, but I use my hands a lot, so I'm going to kind of describe to you.
mhm,
So
mhm,
in our brain, we have input, right, that comes in from our eyes and from our ears and from our five senses, and we immediately have a thought or a belief or a feeling that happens, and when that goes in, it creates a response within the body. So all of these things are happening unconsciously, and when this happens, it starts off in the pituitary gland, which is just kind of like behind your eye. It goes down to the hypothalamus, and then it goes down primarily to your kidneys, and on top of your kidneys you have your little teeny square looking adrenal glands. Those adrenal glands are kind of like the mamas of your stress response per se. So when cortisol, which is our stress response, is released over time, what happens is it will start to, one, we can lose weight initially, which is awesome, right? Like, has anybody went through a divorce and lost 20 pounds? Right? Like, I don't know about you.
I've got a spin to put on this for you though, right? What happens when your pituitary gland actually is dead? Now, I really just want to really question this because mine is, and the way that can happen is from childbirth. So from that intense strain that you're putting yourself through going through childbirth, you can actually, your pituitary gland loses its whole ability to function.
Well, it would.
So what happens then?
It wouldn't be able to lose its entire function, because you wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be functioning. You'd be on all kinds of supplements and stuff like that if that was the case. And you may be, so for patients that have like hypothyroidism and things like that, so then we have to supplement later down in the chain. So if the pituitary is here and the thyroid gland is here and then the adrenals are down here, we're supplementing here.
Yep. So here, I have radiation and it's dead.
Yes.
So
and you probably take a medication.
Right? Yeah. So this is such a real conversation for everybody that's listening, because it's such a real thing that happens, right? Because the pituitary gland from childbirth, but then our thyroid is a disease that can come from the trauma and the overload of the system. And then what happens to the adrenals from there?
So what happens to the adrenals is the adrenals get like tuckered out, right? They get overused. So
you get adrenal fatigue.
And when and you get adrenal fatigue, right? Yep. So when you have a scenario where your adrenals are being utilized for long periods of time, so this chronic stress, and stress can look a million different ways to a million different people, right? So Cass may be like a rock star at handling like 45 million things because that's just who she is, but she may stress out about, I don't know, something that I don't stress out about, like going and standing in front of a unit in a military base. Like, I'm going to go on to a military base, I have no issues, but me managing all the things that she does stresses me out. So we're going to have two different responses to two different things. It's nobody's response is the same. However, you can generalize and say, so that when patients have, or people have long periods of time where they're overthinking, they're worrying, they're trying to figure out, how am I going to do 35 things at one time and be happy with myself and make my spouse happy and make my partner happy and let my kids through college, and oh my gosh, right, it goes on. Then what happens is our cortisol just keeps running. We keep tapping into our adrenal glands, being like, hey, I need more. And when we drink, like right now, I'm drinking like a decaf herbal tea, but we drink coffee. And when we drink coffee, that increases our cortisol too, right? So it gives it like this false cortisol rise. It's great short term, but it's not great like coffee all day long. Not a good thing.
And what do we do after trauma and we're trying to get by? We do that, don't we? And you can have that intense caffeine space coming in too. And then we'll go to the gym, which will increase more cortisol.
Yeah. So what
and then you put on weight.
Right. And the reason why is because cortisol. So cortisol does two things, right? So initially it will make you lose weight, right? Like because it survives, like cortisol will activate glucose and it will also activate burning of fat cells. But it only does it for a period of time and then it stops. But it continues to activate glucose all the time. Anytime glucose is created, it needs to do something.
Mm.
And if you're creating glucose just by sitting in your TV, like sitting on your couch or sitting at the desk stressing out, and you're not doing anything with that energy, then your body's going to use whatever it needs, and it's going to store whatever is left.
Yep.
And our body will store whatever is left into a fat cell.
Yep.
And fat cells are magic little things in that they can grow and be however big they want to be, and they
Yep.
don't have any limitations like muscle cells do.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. Yep.
So that is one of the limitations that happens with cortisol.
Mm.
And it also, think about women as we get older, right? So people, those of us that are in perimenopause or menopause, we start to lose all of our other hormones, start to go down. But if cortisol is still going, it's also starting to tap into and breaking down our bones, right? If we break down our bones, then we can have a fall, we can have something like that, and then that can cause more problems.
Yeah.
So it's a really important part to really pay attention to all this kind of stuff. The other part of that is the aspect of inflammation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So inflammation is another problem of chronic cortisol elevation and chronic levels of stress and chronic trauma and things like that. Is our inflammatory response is just on hyper. So inflammatory responses can look like you are sensitive to smells that you've never been sensitive to. You are now, you're now somebody that you cannot respond to certain foods. You can't eat those foods anymore because now you have an inflammatory response or some type of a hive or an itch, or worst case scenario, an anaphylactic type of response. So like, what do we do, right? What are we supposed to do for all these things? The biggest thing, obviously, is to figure out where is the initial aspect of stress and try to eliminate the stress, try to minimize the stress, try to use things like breath work, meditation, just taking 5 minutes out and calming ourselves down.
The real slow stuff like the yoga and the Pilates and the things that we find really tricky to actually transition into because we're so used to checking all the boxes and go because we keep ourselves busy and can do a million things at once, right? So, you know, that's the way that we're then wired, because we're not allowed to rest. We weren't allowed to sit down because that then means that we're lazy and all of the things that came with it from being in that toxic environment or toxic relationship. So then now when we go to slow down, our body gets the wobbles because it's like, we don't slow down, we just keep going.
Yes.
And I mean, and that for us actually stresses the body, even though you may not recognize that you're stressed, but your body becomes stressed. And then that's when all of these markers come into place, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
yes. And
so for me, the way that I recognize that is literally, I know if I'm stressed or I've eaten something that sets off one of my inflammatory markers, I will literally expand overnight, or I'll need more water. And they're the two signs that I know that I've put something in my body that is inflaming it, that is not good for it because of the chronic compounding effect of narcissistic and emotional abuse.
Yes. And it's really hard. I mean, I hate to say this, but it's not an overnight thing.
No,
and it is a lifelong thing. Like when the body has been, you think about it, it's like, I always like to talk about our bodies as vehicles. You know, I mean, I've got like a 78 Chevy, right? Yeah, you've got a Maserati. I've got a 78 Chevy, and my Chevy is being like, you know, I'm trying to upgrade it. I'm trying to put, you know, like some new paint and things on it. But inside, it's the same motor. I don't get the opportunity to change out the motor like you do in some scenarios. So for us, we have to realize that healing takes time. And some other things that we talked about and that I know sometimes I can be scatterbrained when I talked it, but one of the things too is what are the ways that we can come back and combat some of this inflammatory response and the stresses that we're having. So one of the things that shows up, like Cass mentioned, she feels really bloated, she expands, she gets thirsty, we get really tired, right? So that midday
and you feel
slump,
like a sponge, your whole face like just gets really like
puffy.
a sponge has been absorbed, right? Yeah. So then if you're feeling puffy around here or around here, you physically see it and you're like, oh gosh, I need to lose weight. And you start to hate on yourself when really you've literally just eaten something. That's
Right.
how simple it can be.
It is. It is that simple.
And for me, it's cheese.
Cheese.
God damn it. It's cheese.
Damn it. Cheese is my favorite.
I know. It's cheese.
And the key is to find, if you can find a cheese that you can eat and eat that every once in a while. Like goat cheese is pretty good because it doesn't have as much of a response. It doesn't have as much of the hormones and stuff that like cow cheese does. But one of the things with that is to go back to like what we're talking about is you have your sympathetic nervous system, and then you have your parasympathetic nervous system. So sympathetic nervous system is your norepinephrine, epinephrine, glucose, cortisol, go, 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 go. And then you have your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. Now, these are happening subconsciously underneath the current of who you are, right? Like you don't know that they're happening, they're just happening. So think about a scenario, right? So many of us women, we're going or we're trying to make sure that the kids are, you know, we're taking care of the kids, that we're getting them off to school, we're doing this. What are you doing when you're eating breakfast? Typically, a lot of us are like making it and we're either not eating breakfast, which sometimes can be good if you're intentionally fasting. But if you are just eating, right, while you're getting everything, you're standing up, there is no rest and digest that's happening. Right? Your body actually needs to be in a rest, digest time. So you actually, the best thing to do for when you know, like, hey, I know this week is going to be stressful. I know that I'm stressed out. I'm going to start making intentional time to eat. I'm going to actually sit down. I'm going to put my plate in front of me. I'm going to pick up my food. I'm going to eat it. And I'm going to put my fork down in between my bites, and I'm actually chew my food. Because when you do that, you're turning on and you're allowing that rest and digest to actually digest and utilize all the things that were supposed to be utilized to create a good environment for that food to go into.
Yes. And again, that's similar to that exercise space of yoga and meditation and Pilates. It's a slow down mode, and we don't like to slow down. We don't like to take time. We're very much shortcut conditioned to go and fit as many things in as we possibly can. And then we're actually self-abandoning ourselves. We're not actually taking time for self. We're not prioritizing self. So when we say put yourself first, this is an exact example of how you can do that, because it's so important for your own health and to nurture your body to actually do it this way. Otherwise, we never get into parasympathetic mode, and we're always in flight mode, and we're always pumping extra cortisol and adrenaline into our body, which small periods of time and bursts is fine, but over long periods of time, which is chronic, is day after day after day after day after day, this is why.
Yes. And one of the things I think about is like women with weight gain is oftentimes the reason that we get to a point where we're gaining weight, and then we go exercise and we stop eating, right? Like it's the typical thing. I'm gonna cut back on my calories,
calorie deficit.
Calorie deficit, and increase my exercise. You're just creating a more of a stress response.
You are. It doesn't work for traumatized bodies. No.
It honestly, I mean, it might work for a 21-year-old with no stress in her life or his life. Men work a little bit differently, but for those of us that are either older or have chronic stress, and you know, and trauma can come from, you know, some million different ways. And I know that Cass talks about all the different ways, you know, that trauma can occur in our bodies. But, you know, trauma can be as simple as just being chronically busy and just like spent for everybody else in your life, so that you never take time for yourself. And if you
that's very typical of a single mom, isn't it? Because it's just you're it.
I mean, and I mean, we both have boyfriends, right? We have people that love us, but we're still living that single life because I mean, the long distance relationship
that way. Yeah, exactly. It still stops
Yeah.
with us. We're still the only income comes into the house for our immediate family. So, you know, the buck still stops with us. We're still the one and only. We're still the one that does it for every parent or family member that isn't in the child's life because of the isolation of the narcissistic and emotional abuse. So, you know, we still have this. This is why it's so forever real, and that, you know, healing takes time, but it's also nurturing your body and learning how to do it best takes time. And for women, it changes all the freaking time because of our hormones and, you know, perimenopause and then menopause and then all of the things. You know, it's a forever ending thing, and we just think, fuck me, this body, like, what the heck? So, you know, it is, you know, so it's not necessarily, you know, healing is one big word, but it's more about learning how to nurture yourself the best way so that you can function 100% and do all of those things without placing so much stress on the vehicle that actually allows you to do it in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one thing that you brought up is that transitioning into the yoga or the whatever, it just feels wrong.
Yeah.
And it feels like I'm
Slow.
wasting
It's
my
boring.
time.
Who
Right.
wants to do that? Exactly. We think too much. It's like, yeah.
Yeah. And
Our to-do list adds 10 things to it.
exactly. You're like, no. I don't have an hour for this. I've got maybe 5 minutes.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
one of the things that I think of too is that, so for instance, anytime I ask like my kids to change, or I ask them to do something different than they've been doing on a repetitive basis, and I'm like, nope, I'm not accepting that anymore. Like, we're actually going to have to change. So like for my son, you're going to have to make your breakfast now. Like, he's 10 years old. He needs to make his own breakfast. So it's the aspect of like, you're creating change in your life. And whether it is, regardless of what it is, even if it's good for you, you just need to be aware that any kind of change outside of the normal of what you've always done is going to feel icky. It's going to feel wrong. It's going to feel like, this is stupid, this is dumb, this isn't going to work. And I mean, that was me for forever. And you almost like start saying, like, the people that are talking about it, like, oh yeah, they have no stress in their lives. They don't understand me. They're just, you know, they've got everything handed to them on a silver platter. I'm fucking hustling over here, right? Like, they don't get me. And then you isolate yourself even more because that, I mean, recently I've done this to myself, and I had to sit back and I had to go through the motions of realizing that I was the person that was ostracizing myself away from everybody because it didn't feel good to change. So that's one thing about change, is just to be really, really open to it and be okay with it. The other thing too is specifically talking about like gut health in general. We talked about the whole aspect of rest and digest, as well as, you know, what needs to happen, and the fact that many of us are standing and eating, or driving our cars and eating, or just drinking coffee instead of an actual meal. So one thing is that your digestive system starts here, right? So it starts in our mouth. And when we start to chew, we're creating enzymes and things like that that are going to actually like break down our food and be able to be absorbed inside of the lining of our gut, right? And then when that's absorbed, it has the ability to actually go and start to, you know, run our machine, right? Because otherwise it just sits inside of our stomach like a garbage can. And when it sits in there like a garbage can, it gets mildewy and it festers and it creates gas and it creates all kinds of problems. And then we have these malnourished people who have a lot of psychological problems. Because one of the big things, and I'm sure, Cass, you know this, is that a lot of people, and I don't care what anybody thinks, I'm not going against anybody's belief on medications. I do believe that some people need medications. There is a time and a place for medication. But many people, right? I feel like right now, it's like you go into a doctor's office and everybody and their brother has stress.
Oh yeah.
And everybody.
Or anxiety, or depression, or something, just because their motor's going really slow.
Yes. We were not.
But their motor's going really slow because of their gut. Because of what you're digesting or what you're absorbing from your toxic environment.
Everything. And then the perfumes and don't like Glade plugins and Dawn and the sprinkles that you put to make your clothes smell really good. Like all of that stuff is damaging to your gut. It's damaging to your hormones. It's damaging to your body. And I think the biggest thing is that we just, a lot of doctors just give pills. And the reality is if we gave supplements instead, sometimes, like you need more B12, you need more magnesium, you know, you need
vitamin D.
Vitamin D, yeah, K2, vitamin D3, K2. There's so many things that you need for your body to get that baseline. And I've seen patients like, let me just start you off with some supplements first, and then go from there.
Absolutely.
Really,
and even another thing too that's really important, and again, no disrespect to the space, but you know, the people that prescribe the medications, they get kickbacks from that. You know, even here in Australia, if you go to the doctor and you get a mental health care plan, the doctor gets a kickback from that. And then once the mental health plan gets exercised with the practitioner or therapist, they get another kickback. And then once those sessions are finished, they get another kickback. And you know, these kickbacks aren't just $10 and $20 and $100. They're $500, $1,000, $2,000, $300. And then when they're being prescribed medication, they get a kickback and a commission from selling medication. And it's such a serious, real thing that nobody talks about.
That's very different here in America.
And it happens.
We don't.
And I mean, I'm not saying it happens everywhere, but it is a thing that does happen.
Yes.
And it's something that's not talked about, and it's very real. So, you know, for you to go in and say, oh, look, you know, this and this, and that's why they're so easy to write scripts, you know, and because the pharmaceutical companies are there to push their product, you know, and they push it through the system, through the medical and the healthcare system in however which way they can to be able to make their money. So, you know, that's why you see particular brands on a shelf that have one brand, but they've named it 10 different ways, but it's the same product. But you think you need
like
all 10 of them for the same thing, but then it's just a placebo effect because of words on the box. So, you know, the stuff then that we put in our body to ease the disease and these symptoms sometimes can actually inflame us more. It actually creates more toxicity in our body in a chemical way,
100%.
Not just in a toxicity, psychological, emotional way that's coming through as well. So, you know, and it's really important to remember what you're putting in your body, what you're absorbing from your environment, what you're feeding your brain, all of those things, because it all makes up that biological impact at a cellular level to what your body and how your body responds to yourself.
I mean, the key to our cells is we need healthy cells. And often many of us don't have healthy cells because of the fact that we're not feeding good and healthy, life-giving things to ourselves. We're not in environments that are, you know, just bringing in clean air and fresh whatevers. It's because we are constantly in an environment where we're bombarded with 1,000 different things. And it's really hard. I know if you're stressing out about like life stuff, right? Like kids, money, where am I going to be? How am I going to do it? How the hell are you supposed to worry about food on top of it, right? And environment and things like that. So with my patients, I really try to stress is that if you can make small changes over time, in the end, it will make a difference. And sometimes you won't become 180, right? Sometimes you won't go 180. Sometimes you only go 90. Right? Or sometimes it's only 25%. But if you're 25% in the green, that's better than where you were yesterday.
Exactly. So what's one, what are some really small practical steps, you know, that are equaling this little bit of change? Like, what are some practical steps that the listeners and the viewers can take away today to know that they can implement these really simple, easy steps to create this compounded effect of change over time that will benefit their body and their sort of mind, body, soul connection?
So I'm going to start with food first. And the reason I'm going to start with food is because food is one of those things that if we can do this foundationally, it will make a difference to so many things, right? So if you're going to have a cup of coffee, try to have a cup of coffee one cup of coffee like an hour and a half to 2 hours after you wake up. Allow your cortisol level to kind of do its normal thing like it's supposed to, and then have a cup of coffee. If you want to have a cup of like decaf tea or something like that beforehand, okay. Processed foods, right? So if it was made by man and not made by God, don't consume it. Doesn't mean that you can't ever, right? It doesn't mean that you can't ever. It just means that you don't live on it on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's not your 3 meals a day.
Exactly, right? Right. So obviously processed food is things like going out to eat, because we don't know what that food that we're getting unless we're going to a specific organic type of place. But otherwise is like, if you can go to the grocery store and you can pick it up and you can look at the label and it just says orange steak, you know, like it doesn't have, you know, 15 different ingredients.
Things.
Yeah. So my rule for most things is if it has 5 or less ingredients, it's usually okay. And you got to know your ingredients. I mean, there's more to it, but just 5 or less is usually an okay thing to eat over, you know, from the aisles and not the outside of the grocery store. So that's another one. Eating on the outside of the grocery store is going to get you more of the, you know, the healthier God food, as I like to call it. Making time for eating. Right? So rest and digest, like actually having a meal, enjoying a meal with happy people, making your kids and you sit down and have dinner together. That's one way of doing things. Other things are water, making sure that you're getting plenty of water a day. You should be getting half your body weight in ounces of water a day to make sure that you're cleansing out your system. Another is really making an intention for sleep. So your
sleep
magic
coming up. It's bloody
sleep
important.
is huge, right? So sleep, your body begins and starts to do its most healing between like 10:30 and 2:30 in the morning. Most of us don't go to bed, or a lot of people don't go to bed till like 11:30, 11 o'clock, right? So if you can get to bed by like 9:30, 10 o'clock and utilize that, it will make a world of difference for how your body is being actually cleansed and like basically decontaminated overnight. Rejuvenate is a better word. I'm like decon.
You're like decomposing. We're not talking about dead bodies here, but okay.
Yes. Lisa, when eating, don't fill your fork till you're finished with mouthful. That's a good one. That's a really good one. Like actually setting your fork down, chewing your food is a really, really good one. Other things that I do, that I implement. So these are some things that I've always had a lot of issues with stressing out in the moment. So when, especially like I had a moment, I'll just give you a scenario. I have this year coming up in my command, we have these major changes that are happening in the battalion, and there's all these things that are all happening brand new, never happened in the Army in 10 years, are all happening now. And I have to implement them. And one of the things is one of my soldiers dropped the ball on getting things done, right? So as leaders, we're always having to say, okay, this is what I want, but also having to follow up and verifying that it's completed. And it's 2 days out. He didn't do what he needs to do. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a really big deal. So I was stressed out about 2 hours ago. And so what I have learned to do is to talk to myself kind of like my own therapist. And I tell myself, you know what, Kiona, the world is not going to end. We're going to be okay. We're going to be fine. This is not going to end your life. Everybody's going to keep moving. This is just a bump. This is a learning opportunity. And I speak to myself like I would speak to my child, or like, you know what I mean? Like how I would speak to my
give that advice
self
to somebody else, because we're good at doing it for everyone else, but not ourselves. So
Yes. So I do a lot of that. And then I do a lot of like just breathing. So in the moment, taking the opportunity to sit and do box breathing. So box breathing, I'm sure maybe Cass has talked about this before, but the way I do it is I just breathe in for 4 seconds. I hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds. And I just try to teach my patients to imagine going around the box every time you do that. And you can actually feel your heart rate slow down. You
Well, that
calm
pulls us
down.
out of the two modes in our vagus system, in our polyvagal system, where we're going from one sympathetic mode to the other sympathetic mode. That puts us into that rest space. So it literally kicks you straight out of flight and flight mode immediately. Using the breath, taking your big breaths and actually intentionally sitting there for 2 minutes until you can feel yourself sort of just and then you've literally brought yourself out of that state in minutes.
100%.
Yeah.
So this is me in perimenopause having a hot flash. This is happening.
See, it just happens. It's all happening.
It's so horrible. I'm like, dear Lord Jesus. But those are the main things that I do. And then the other thing is if you have the opportunity to go out and go for a walk and be in nature, please do that. Because
it's the oxygen, people. It's the oxygen.
It's amazing.
It's getting the carbon dioxide out of your body and getting the oxygen into your body that makes a massive difference as to the way that the composition of your internal insides works. And even if you can imagine, like oxygen going in and carbon dioxide going out, and replacing that, you're replacing toxic with fresh, crisp air. And it just, it's not just about exercise. It's actually about that chemical composition again into your body that helps all of the dis-ease become ease, become easier. It just helps your body digest. It helps your body recover, rejuvenate, energize itself in just those moments. So even if it's only 20 minutes, it doesn't have to be hardcore hour every single day, 20 minutes a day, 2-3 blocks, and just that. And not in a concrete city space. It needs to be with trees where there's more oxygen and things like that, because it's putting that into your body again. You're not absorbing all of the toxic, you're actually replacing it.
And I also feel like genuinely that there is a spiritual aspect of nature. I really, really do. I mean, I know for me that when I have an opportunity to, like, I grew up in the country and in the woods, and I have lived in the city for so long, so that like my body craves being outside of the city. And when I get into the country, and if you have an opportunity to, like, I had a weekend and I went to Georgia and I was up in the mountains, and it was like the most blessed 4 days of my life. Like, I just was like, I just love this, the cool air, so many things that I don't get here in Florida.
Exactly. And even just going to the beach has the same effect too. So if you go to the city, like here in Australia where I am, if you go to Melbourne, go to the beach, take your shoes off, go walk in the sand, because that sea air makes all the difference. It's like when you go to the country from the city, or you go to the beach from wherever, and you just find that you are more tired and that you sleep better, you breathe easier. It's because your body is resting, full resting, just from that one change. So, that's another great little change is, get away to the country for the day, get away to the beach for the day, get away to the water for a day. And, just that small act can make all the difference to the way that trauma has affected your body. Wow. Beautiful.
Those are some big things that I do, and they've made a big difference. They've made a big difference.
Absolutely.
And stress still happens, right? Like, and this is one of the things that I've always I always have to remind myself, like, I think sometimes in the self-help world that we think we're going to be free from ever having issues in the future. And that's not going to happen.
Because life happens.
Because life happens, right?
And it doesn't mean that trauma is going to happen. It just means that life happens. We evolve, we want more, things change, we change, our decisions change, our lifestyle changes, all of the things. Our kids grow up.
And it's so empowering to be able to go through something that would have literally rocked your world and brought you down to zero when in the past. And now you're like, okay. Got this, moving forward.
That's the most incredible, most powerful space, isn't it, when we're doing that? And just exactly like what you've just mentioned is the best way to finish this segment. It's just because you get to this space where it's like, it's a blip.
Okay.
Amazing.
I'm moving on.
And that's perfect. Love that. Well, thank you so much for sharing. I always love our sessions when we come and do this. Now, I'm going to
Absolutely.
pop how you can find Kiona all in the notes of this live so that you can go over and join her Facebook group, check her out on Instagram and her Facebook page. Is there anywhere else anyone can find you?
I am on TikTok, just getting started on there. So there's only a couple
Amazing.
little things on
All right.
TikTok.
So once this goes live in the group, pop that link in the comment because I don't have your TikTok link.
Okay.
Put that in the comments and yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for joining
Awesome.
us. Thank you
Thanks
for
so much,
saying yes to
Cass.
this series. And yeah, I'll talk to you.
All right. Bye, everyone. Take care.